Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the newly released entry to the long-running first-person shooter series, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and see how its 16 multiplayer maps compare to their original appearances in 2009's Modern Warfare 2. For this video, both games are being played on the PC, with the graphics settings pushed as high as possible at a 4K resolution. Though, it is worth noting that because these games have nearly a decade of graphical technology separating them, the focus with today's video is going to be less on how much better the new game looks technically, and more on the artistic design of these classic environments themselves, and how the environmental artists and designers at all the studios involved in these projects have adapted these beloved battlegrounds to suit the artistic direction of the more recent era in the Call of Duty franchise. Also, because there are a lot of changes within each map, I decided that for this video, I'm going to just give a brief rundown of the bigger changes in each map. Afterwards, I'll provide you with some uninterrupted back-to-back footage to help give you a greater sense of how much has been altered, as I feel this will both provide context, while also giving you a chance personally to decide which visual direction you prefer overall. So let's kick this comparison off with our first map in the playlist, Afghan. As you can already plainly see, a major difference between the two games that stands out right away is the starkly different lighting design. This is a change that will become apparent across every environment here, as the game's lighting system has not only evolved drastically with the newer IW engine framework, but the actual lighting artists have also tweaked the directional lighting as well, resulting in shadows in areas that previously were brightly lit. This will impact the visibility throughout the course of gameplay, and of course, will directly impact the general vibe of the environment itself too. With the original version of Afghan, for example, you got this sense of being in a dry, arid desert, with dirt and sand kicking up every now and again and obscuring the sightlines. There's still that sand effect in the new version, but it's not quite as abundant, and the map itself feels a bit darker and more densely packed with detail like vegetation, rock, and other miscellaneous props. Unsurprisingly, things like level geometry, texture maps, and the overall complexity of the environment are massively improved with the latest version, making large rock outcroppings like this one appear more natural than in the past. And transitionary points between things like walls and the ground are done much more cleanly, making things like this brick wall here feel properly integrated into the environment itself. Even those tiny objects like loose bottles and trash feature higher poly counts and extremely detailed surfaces, even if those objects themselves don't seem as plentiful as in the past. Another interesting change is that most, if not all, the static military equipment found in the map, and many of the others that we'll discuss today, are completely updated. Humvees are often replaced with MRAPs, as those are the new standard for the US military. The AC-130's old prop engines are replaced with jet turbines, and the old Soviet-era anti-aircraft gun around the back cliffside has been updated into a ground-to-air missile system. The new version of this map also shows black smoke and fire still engulfing bits and pieces of the C-130 as well, though inside the cave system, the simulated water caustics used on the nearby ceiling haven't been replicated, along with some of the other details like the large collection of Soviet-era weapons being stockpiled by the Ops 4. Moving on, we have a very different style of environment with Derail. While not the most popular map in this collection, Derail has seen several changes to its design that I feel drastically impact the feel of the gameplay. The dense forest has been stripped bare, with many trees having been toppled over and cut down. This opens the sightlines considerably, making it ideal for snipers to cover the entire area from the road or the opposite warehouse. The center derail point, on the other hand, has been expanded, with the center pillar being reduced in size, allowing for more space on either side. And the train cars are also no longer derailed into the river itself. Then of course, there's all the visual improvements that go along with the update, like better textured surfaces, much better geometry, and exponentially more detail all around that aim to make this map more appealing. Though the jury's still out on whether those changes are enough to change the environment's poor reputation. There's still a few changes here made that I do feel hurt the presentation of this new design. Most importantly, the center office building, that feels weirdly clean and brightly lit this time around. Small environmental storytelling details have also been removed, like this little heater surrounded by chairs at the base of the staircase, that's now covered up by a large pillar. Next up, we have the old hillside estate. Just like Derail, Estate has seen a lot of its lush tree line reduced in hopes of improving player visibility. The estate itself is more visible, with only 4 or 5 trees blocking sight from the bottom of the road to the cliffside window. And once again, the color tone has been greatly reworked, giving the map a warmer feel than in the past. Decor within the estate has been totally reimagined, making it more grounded and realistic. All the weird mismatching knickknacks that were regularly used to decorate interiors in those old games have been scrapped in favor of new artwork and models. The main living room space has also been filled with a bunch of military equipment too, and the kitchen has what appears to be bomb-making materials, tying it in more closely to the game's war-torn theme. Favela is one of my personal favorites from Modern Warfare 2, and of all the maps reimagined for Modern Warfare 3, I feel this one was given an exceptional amount of love and care. The favela feels noticeably more detailed and denser this time around, with an impressive backdrop outside the playable space that gives a more proper sense of scale for the area being portrayed. New bright, vibrant graffiti tags litter the walls all around, adding in way more color variety that helps the location really pop on the screen. And the addition of things like the water drainage leaking into the center alleys and pouring down the muddy steps is a great touch. The soccer ball appears to be missing, as is the iconic barber pole at the corner of the second-story barbershop. And you'll also notice, like with the military vehicles before, that a lot of the pedestrian vehicles have been updated too, scrapping their old 1960s look. But aside from that, the favela retains the same look and feel, only with considerably more detail, better lighting, and better surrounding atmosphere to sell the location. High Rise is another big fan favorite from Modern Warfare 2, with its nicely balanced 3-lane structure set atop an office building complex with a connecting rooftop. Unlike Favela, I do feel as though the High Rise looked better aesthetically in its original debut, as a lot of the bits and pieces that gave this map personality, like the tarps fluttering in the wind along the center lane, the dense debris scattered throughout, and the bullpen office spaces are massively simplified with this latest version. I do like how they made one side of the map more of a construction site, with the center pillars having a fresh coat of paint on them, and the rear counters having not been finished yet. I also am happy to see all the great secret paths like the many cranes and hidden ladders are retained, which is the type of fun map design you just don't see in modern shooter games anymore. But the overall modern design of this office space, its cleaner appearance, and the lack of detail outside feels like a step back, even if it was done to stay consistent with the new artistic direction for the area. Invasion suffers from this even worse though. This might be the single most disappointing update in the 16 maps, as these war-torn streets look so bare by comparison. The North Street, for example, has been weirdly widened into a 2-lane road, with very little cover present to make this change practical. Then, on the South Street, all of that thick rubble from the nearby wrecked buildings feels like it's been neatly gathered in piles on the side of the road. The whole map feels like it's been sanitized, even if there are still some obvious signs of damage and decay on the edges. The US Embassy further down the road does look better than it did before, with greater detail inside and out that does a better job of selling this as a place that people worked and had to quickly abandon. But otherwise, I feel the changes made to this map only take away from the original design, and it comes off lacking any real personality. Karachi is more of the same deal. The map looks better at first glance, with a lot better texture maps, models, geometry, and lighting. But it's surprising to see changes to more iconic bits of the map, like the chickens being scaled down in quantity in the market area, or the rubble in the collapsed center building having been, once again, neatly gathered in small piles. It's very possible that these kinds of changes are all done to better improve visibility in areas that were regularly too visually confusing for combat. But I'm curious if this may make the map less memorable as a result. You'll also find that those old emplaced miniguns in the original Modern Warfare 2 are no longer available to use in these updated maps, which isn't too surprising due to the completely different weapon balancing and gameplay design in place. Moving on, we have the Quarry. the Quarry overall wasn't all too interesting to revisit. It's a popular map as well, though with it having been featured as a location in last year's Warzone map, the excitement to see this area return has worn a bit thin. I do like how the stone blocks have been chipped away this time around, which helps to give the Quarry a little bit more character than its original design. But outside of that, and all the other technical changes already discussed prior, this map hasn't done anything particularly major to stand out. Next up, we have Rundown. Here we have another map that has been greatly overhauled from a visual perspective, almost transforming it into something else entirely. Alongside Favela, Rundown features a massively increased level of detail across the board, with lots of bright, vibrant color, new interior details, and even completely reworked lighting tones overall. The map appears more warm than before, with this almost sepia tone appearance portraying its time of day much differently. I believe the small town looks much less war-torn than its predecessor, which is arguably the wrong direction for this type of Call of Duty location, but it certainly makes the map stand out better than it ever did before. I also found it interesting that some of the larger structures have been essentially reworked into new buildings, mainly this large bell tower structure that previously served as the town's church, but now is renamed into the City Hall. Rust is probably one of Modern Warfare 2's more iconic locations, mostly due to the arguments that were supposedly settled here. The location is the smallest map offered in the game, and is centered around this large industrial tower that's been completely rusted over. The map's been featured again in 2019's Modern Warfare as well, so newer players may already recognize it. Though this year's version of the map makes an interesting cosmetic change that again contrasts with its namesake even more than Rundown. All the metal panels that make up the structure are now much cleaner and new, with what looks like newly installed aluminum paneling, with only a small hint of wear and tear. The level design is mostly retained, with a few changes that we've seen incorporated before, like the small crawl space in the corner, and other smaller tweaks made to the short cover like barrels and low walls, along with the large tanks on the opposite side of the map. Though it's otherwise the same old Rust, just with a bit of a cleaner look. Scrapyard is another classic map that's already been reintroduced to players a few years back, and hasn't seen too many drastic changes otherwise. As always, the graphic quality on the surface is massively improved, with more detail and superior geometric complexity to the rounded plain pieces used as tunnels in the center. The office at the end of the map looks a bit different inside, with this one bottom floor being given a more reflective ground surface. But the real noteworthy change is how the particles are handled by this burning vehicle. While yes, the alpha effects and particles are technically a higher quality in the newer Modern Warfare 3, I do still love the look of the old Modern Warfare 2 version here, as the particle density of the embers blowing towards the center still hold up very nicely. But again, the new version is much more impressive when it comes to those fireballs emitting from the tanker itself, and you'll even notice some screen space reflections at play as the fire reflects off the metal surface of the nearby planes. Next, we have Skidrow, a really dirty looking apartment complex that mostly retains its initial look and feel. The layout is the same, and all that dirt and grime is most definitely still present, even more so in some cases. Though there's been a few changes, like an active fire coming out of that central second-story window, and all these great little effects spread throughout, like loose cables and wires causing sparks in the laundromat. The central bookstore has been reimagined as an old movie store, and the upstairs hallways have been totally reworked, with different lighting placement, new props replacing the old ones, and the small floor space that players could shoot through before being covered up entirely. Another of the few instances where an actual balancing change has been made. The subbase is another map that I feel has lost a lot of its personality with the remake. The lead reason for this is the general lighting and post-processing being used. In the original, the subbase had a very thick bloom applied to really drive home that snowy atmosphere. This was then coupled with thick snowfall that, while not excessive, was very clearly noticeable at all times. The remake, however, doesn't make use of those same post-processing effects, opting for a much more realistic tone. But it also, strangely, scales back the amount of snowfall on screen, with only very light snowfall at any one time. The map's exterior locations feel much darker and less interesting as a result of these changes, which is interesting as the interior spaces are the complete opposite, opting for much more detail in hallways like this one that sell it more as an abandoned Soviet base than before. The map overall just seems to miss the mark, and while its base layout is still fun to play in, there's a lot missing from it aesthetically that keeps it from being better than the original. Then we arrive at another fan favorite, Terminal. Terminal takes place in a Russian airport, the very same airport used in the infamous No Russian mission from Modern Warfare 2's campaign. Because of this, the map is littered with disturbing imagery of the aftermath of the massacre, most notably a large pool of blood around this lower area, and tons of abandoned suitcases scattered throughout. Interestingly, the Modern Warfare 3 remake of this map almost entirely abandons this concept. The map is more or less pristine, with the only bloodstains I could find being near the burger town on the upper floor. Suitcases have been stashed away, and the floor space around the terminal looks like it's been totally cleared of clutter. It's another example of the map being somewhat sanitized, which I feel misses the entire point of the location to begin with. That being said, there are still some great designs incorporated here that bring this map into the modern era, like better color coordination and lighting design, resulting in some simulated bounce lighting in areas like this one, and even a few fun Easter eggs like the 20th anniversary banners hanging throughout, along with the airport itself having been named after Call of Duty 4's late antagonist, Imran Zakhaev. The centerpiece in the upper terminal has also been reimagined into a new artistic structure that looks a bit better than the old tree from before, even if it does remove a bit of the color variety in that space. The main plane outside has also been slightly tweaked, with a wider lane between the rows of seats, making it easier to traverse. But other than that, this map should play just about the same as you remember, and is still one of the better maps in the collection. Next up, we have the Underpass. Underpass is another great level, given some fantastic visual updates. The map takes place in Brazil again, and uses a lot of the assets we saw featured throughout Favela and Rundown, though this map features heavy rainfall, giving the developers a chance to really flex the specular lighting and shader work. The muddy slopes and wet concrete look fantastic here, and stand out considerably better than they ever did in the past. Like with Subbase, the color grading and post-processing doesn't give you quite the same feeling of fighting inside a dense storm, but the rain particles and the occasional lightning strike illuminating the screen do a decent job. And I was also happy to hear actually decent sound accompanying the rainfall, something that I found is not done well in most video games. The level of detail overall has also been scaled up considerably, most notably in this drainage ditch that previously looked very simple and bare. And lastly, we arrive at Wasteland, a map that was actually a remake itself back when it was featured in Modern Warfare 2, as it was initially featured in the first Call of Duty 20 years ago. Wasteland was always one of the uglier maps in the original Modern Warfare 2, so it's nice to see this one properly updated, with a massive increase to the grass density, along with some appropriate color tone, lighting, and shadowing to go along with it. The map still retains its Wasteland Pripyat look, though I was surprised to see iconic structures like this one totally redesigned into a stone structure with more intricate details. Even more interesting is this statue that featured 2 Russian soldiers, redesigned into an ugly electrical unit. Finally, let's wrap up with some audio comparisons. This will give you a chance to listen to the changes made to the ambient sound effects for each map. Which version of each map do you prefer? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, when it comes to the map redesigns, I think it's plain to see that the levels themselves all look much better from a technical standpoint. Textures have all been updated, the geometry is more complex, vegetation and other environmental debris is usually increased, and all of the lighting has been completely overhauled, giving each area a brand new look. The real question is, are all these changes beneficial to the artistic design first shown in 2009? Personally, I think there's several maps here that had more character and personality than they do now. Invasion in particular was pretty disappointing, as was the sub-base. A lot of the changes that were made totally missed the point of the maps altogether, like Rust and Rundown, even if they do technically look better. But on the bright side, every one of these maps plays just as great as they did over 10 years ago. And considering the state of the newer maps we saw in games like Modern Warfare 2 last year, I think I'd much prefer more of these classic remakes for the time being. But what do you guys think? Do you like the look of the remade maps used for Modern Warfare 3? Or do you still prefer the classic Modern Warfare 2 instead? Let me know in the comments section. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this posted every week.